Welcome to Under the Shell, presented by Terrapin Sports Central. This week, we are pleased to welcome you to a special March Madness edition of Under the Shell. I am Brendan Weissel.
Sam Jane.
Michael Big Mike House.
And let's get into it. We have our first ever interview with a member of the women's basketball team. Sam, tell us what we got there.
Yeah, we actually have a senior guard, someone who's coming over from Princeton and has really been an elite shooter. And not only that, but an elite personality, really fun to talk to, incredible stories. We figure out why she was suspended for a year. That's Abby Meyers. Take it away, Abby. Take it away past us. Hope you guys enjoy.
Well, we are happy to have on Maryland transfer and Maryland shooting guard Abby Meyers, who's continuing to have a big year. And she's looking forward to March. Abby, thanks for coming on Under the Shell, and we really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. Thank you guys for having me.
So, Abby, obviously a pretty decent-sized break between the end of the Big Ten tournament, start of the NCAA tournament. What's practice been like? What's team morale heading into next week?
Yeah, really just focusing on ourselves this week. We been doing a lot of scrimmaging, doing a lot of offensive, just getting shots up, working on our ball handling and passing, and just really feeling good about our play going into next week.
Mike, I was just gonna, Abby, as I was kind of looking through, your stats, you obviously came here, and it's kind of been a big deal for you, obviously, is the team bonding. And I, there's that story about how you guys went on a team retreat earlier this year, and now you've kind of gotten to the point where I'm sure you know everybody. Who have you kind of met at first at the team retreat that personalities are like, you're just like, well, that's not what I expect. Because I'm sure people kind of are a little more reserved when they're first meeting you. You know what I mean? I'm sure you're a little more reserved. Who's changed the most, and who have you seen kind of adapt and evolve in terms of their relationship with teammates?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think for me, in August when I got on campus, I got close with Emma, Chardon, and E because we were the only ones really on campus, and everyone else was taking their 2-week break. So I got really close with them, and kind of gravitated towards them at the start of the retreat. But everyone's got a really different, amazing personality. I think Nay has a goofy, funny, but also just a personality that you wouldn't get at from just meeting her in a group. She loves interior design, wants to design really nice mansions when she's older, and has a lot of, I guess, connections in the NBA. So if she can work with some NBA guys, I think that's really cool for her. But I think with everyone's kind of broken out of their shell. No pun intended there. But everyone's kind of broken out of their shell.
You can be our media manager for the podcast. You already got slogans going.
Yeah, seriously. But even the freshmen, right? I'm really close with one of the freshmen that I didn't think I would be, Ava on the team, and just similar interests that you kind of just learn throughout the season. And but yeah, everyone's just unique in their own way, which I love. Their personalities, you learn something new about them every day. But the retreat definitely helped kind of open people up and start to trust people more and have good conversations with people. So that was a lot of fun.
Kind of what happened at that retreat and how did it come about?
Yeah. The retreat was a great idea, right? 9 new transfers, super rare for any team coming in. So we really had to mesh and learn each other fast, especially since we didn't have a lot of time. And the coaches came up with an amazing idea to do a fun retreat. They didn't tell us. They told us we were going to do something together away off campus. And I thought we were going to stay in a hotel somewhere and go day, do something fun. But no, they had a grand plan to go to the Shenandoah Valley in the middle of nowhere in this beautiful log cabin. And I've been there actually growing up to the Shenandoah Valley, the mountains. So I knew a lot about it and was really excited. But what we did was we did bonfires. We had cooking competitions. We made burgers and stuff. We did this Terp Olympics, which were essentially split us up into 3 or 4 teams. And we did just fun really fun games that anyone of any age, like it brings the kid out in you, where like you had this giant jar of like Skittles or M&Ms, and then you had like whoever was able to like separate them by color first as a team wins, and they had like a scoreboard and everything. We had face paint going, color schemes, and yeah, that was just like a lot of fun. What else did we do? We went to the Luray Taverns, saw, just the caves and everything. So yeah, we did a lot of stuff in a weekend. They really packed it in, but it was worth it.
Who's the best cook? Who would you give that to?
Ooh, honestly, Bree. I would say Bree
Oh.
McDaniel. She cooks a lot actually, and so she's
Yeah.
got that chef's touch.
And she is just full of surprises. Farming, cooking. She's got it all.
She does.
You're talking about team building. You were obviously voted captain, and then as announced earlier at the beginning of this season. Was that something you really expected coming in, transferring into Maryland? What kind of went down there to get you, and then you became captain? What was that process?
Yeah. I was a captain at Princeton my senior year, so I knew what it took to be a good captain, a good leader, and just a good communicator in general. And I thought that I had the experience, I had the overall composure to be a captain and be a spokesperson for the team mainly. And I had that expectation of, okay, if I don't earn the respect, trust of my teammates, then they're not going to want me to be their captain because they're not going to trust me, right? So I really made an effort to kind of get to know people one-on-one, took advantage of that at Shenandoah Valley, and just showed every day in practice that I was willing to work hard, give 100% effort and energy. And they voted me as one of the 4 captains, and I was super honored to be that.
Kind of shifting the focus to your career before Maryland, you were playing at Princeton in Ivy League. What was the differences like balancing the schoolwork between Maryland and Princeton?
Yeah, I think you make it work no matter what, right? I think Princeton definitely is rigorous academic schedule. Didn't have an academic advisor like at Maryland, so it comes with the disadvantages here at Maryland. You have so many more resources and just like leverage, I would say, than at Princeton, where they have this motto where you are a student first, athlete second, and you're going to be treated like any other student, no matter the fact that you're an athlete. So juggling the workload here hasn't been a difficult transition. The business school is definitely rigorous and has a lot of expectations and workload, but I've definitely been able to take those skills that I've learned from Princeton here to Maryland.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about that because I was doing some reading and I saw that when you were a freshman, you got like a disciplinary suspension for some sort of like misunderstanding. And then you became like a peer mentor because you wanted to, maybe help kids who had that same experience. I saw that you were on vacation and had to wake up at like 5 a.m. to get like on the Zoom with
doing your research. I love it, Sam.
What happened there? This is your chance to, you're no longer a Princeton, you can speak freely. What happened there? And why did you, try to help kids? Because I mean, that's a pretty honorable thing to do, to not take it as like screw this school, this shit's stupid. Like you kind of, it seemed like grew from it and matured from it. What happened and why'd you do that?
Yeah, I think complication with the data science class. End of the day, you work on projects with students, and some projects you can't work on with students. And had a similar line of code, and that garnered a 1-year academic separation from the university. And obviously those in hindsight, in those moments, you just feel anger, you feel denial, you feel really just like hatred for the institution that put you in that position. You obviously did. I put myself in that position. I made that choice, but it's I think that the year off was probably the best year of my life in terms of I never had a free year to do whatever I wanted, and I planned it out. I did an internship. I was able to travel, and not many people are lucky enough to have that, but I was. So I made the most of it and came back just as like a super sophomore. But at the end of the day, it hasn't really impacted me any more than it did that 1 year emotionally. Even in my, I was able to get internships at Nike. I was able to really make the most of my experience. And at the end of the day, it was a great learning experience, and I wanted to give back. I wanted to really educate students and help them and almost represent them who were going through a similar thing, because the university does not provide a lot of I would just say direction, guidelines when it comes to its rights, its rules, and its responsibilities for students and the honor code. And it's definitely an archaic, I would say archaic, just overall archaic rules and regulations. It came about when people had encyclopedias and papers, and in order for you to really try and get ahead and potentially cheat or get an advantage, you had to really work hard to do that. Whereas now you can do that by a simple mishap. So I think that for me, it was just trying to change the overall internal structure of the honor system at Princeton. I think that it's very, very, it's a little too, I don't want to get into it. I can talk about this for hours, but I wanted to give back. I wanted to help students that were going through a similar emotional, journey as I did. So
basically, it's a bunch of old white dudes sitting up there running academic motivation. We'll sum it up for you in a sentence.
There you go.
What was that like returning back from a year absence of playing? Do you feel a little rusty? And how did you make sure you trained and were able to return as seamlessly as possible?
Yeah, I think that there's one thing I've learned. It's don't hype up your expectations, right? I think for me, I came off my freshman year being, one of the best freshmen in the league, all tournament team, had a great freshman year. And when I took that year off, I trained, I envisioned myself coming back, being a stronger player, being just a better player, and wanting to make a big hit right at the start. But a lot of things happened, a lot of things changed, right? I had that year off, new coaching change, new teammates. And I really had to, and I had all these expectations along with it, to the point where my expectations were met when I came back. It actually took me a little longer than I thought to readjust. My confidence, started at all-time high, and then it lowered throughout the year. I didn't start. I wanted to start due to injury at the start of the season. So many things changed. And, that I think kind of helped teach me that, coming into Maryland, don't have those high expectations, just stay in the moment, stay in the present, work your butt off, and let things kind of play out.
Yeah, I heard, so this is kind of pivoting gears to when you were in high school, but I heard from somebody that you're actually home now, but your mom, so it came down to Princeton and Stanford for you, right? Those were the two
Correct.
kind of main ones.
Correct.
And Tara Vanderveer, who's like a legend for the pot. She's a Stanford coach. She's been to a couple Final Fours, pretty much a legend, came in. And Princeton, you can't get athletic scholarships, right? They don't offer that.
Correct.
So Tara Vanderveer's in your home. I just want you to tell this, and your mom asked how are we going to pay for Stanford, because they don't offer athletic scholarships. Your dad or your high school coach said that your mom thought that Stanford and Princeton had the same rules in terms of scholarships. Do you remember that at all? And
oh my gosh,
was that pretty funny for you?
Well, I will say Peter Kanata has a great memory, and that's something my mom would definitely ask, because she loves the game, and sometimes things sometimes I guess maybe she thought it was it wasn't Ivy League, but the academic level that maybe they also didn't offer, just money scholarships. But that's funny. I actually did not, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
But, I guess Tara got a good laugh, and maybe that made her more confident that I was going to go there, because of the fact that maybe that scholarship thing was gonna,
and then you spurned her. For Princeton.
I know. Whoops. I know she came all the way out here. I had Tara Vanderveer in my house. Pretty cool thing to say.
It's pretty dope. No worries though. You ended up at the dream school, right? And then made it back to Maryland. So
yes,
world works though.
It all worked out.
Yeah. So speaking of making it back to Maryland, what was the recruiting process like the second time? And how would you say if there's any differences from when you're in high school versus transfer from college to college?
Yeah, I think the thing about going into transferring after playing at a school for 3 athletic years is coaches aren't going to sugarcoat it for you as when you're in high school. They're going to make it look like this fantasy world, the best place ever. You want to go there the next day, commit, they're just giving you all this amazing treatment and love. And I think as a graduate transfer, you already know the truth behind it all. The practices, the long hours and the grueling emotional roller coaster you're going to be on. So they don't sugarcoat it. And I think for me, when I visited Maryland, is they really just showed me the resources, the buildings, the places I'm going to be the most, right? And they definitely did sell me a lot on the overall just training facilities, the massages that we get, the ice baths, the hot tubs, all of it. So it was helpful that I had prior experience though in the recruitment process, because I could kind of figure out things a little bit easier, I would say.
And then kind of back to the recruiting process, what was Coach Freese's pitch to you? I know she's known as one of the best college basketball coaches there is. What was her pitch to you, and what do you see in her that separates her from the rest of the pack?
Yeah, I think I remember, and I know she does this probably with other recruits as well, but their media created like a video and good music in the background. It was pretty much like all my highlights from the past year at Princeton. And, that kind of was just like, all right, like I can't play here. I got all these moves, like I can make shots. And, her sell was essentially, we know how to win, you know how to win, let's win together. And for me that was the golden ticket. And of course I grew up watching Coach Freese, and she's a celebrity in Maryland for sure, and obviously in the world of college basketball. So to be in her office with my parents and having her talk to me about how they want me to play for them, it was just a surreal moment, and one that it took a lot of work to get to. So I knew Maryland was going to be the place for me.
I was going to ask, so, when you're talking about all this recruiting stuff, and now this might be something that, didn't play a role, but obviously Maryland is a huge Jewish community, and you are Jewish, and I've heard and seen that you're at events and things like that nature. Not a lot of athletes are engaged in the community as much as maybe you are. Was that a role at all when you came to Maryland? And then, how do you go about putting yourself out there so that people, kind of get to know Abby and know that she's not, just a basketball player. Like, I have things beyond that.
Yeah, I think the good thing about going to Princeton for 4 years is that, not many normal students care about athletics, right? Not many people know that you're an athlete. There's not much of an identity separation at Princeton. It's all mixed together. So I was always at the Jewish center of Jewish life, getting meals there, hanging out with friends there, and just being a part of the community. So I kind of transferred that to Maryland. And for me, yes, I'm a basketball player, and I didn't know that I was that great of a basketball player until people kind of showed that to me. And I always want to be involved in the community. I think that for me, I love the fact that I'm Jewish, and that's really been heightened this past year than any other years I've played, which is really cool. And so when someone invites me to a fun event with good food and good social life, then I'm going to go.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Okay, Abby. So every week we have a rapid fire segment. So with Coach Freed, we did some with, her most overrated food, best post-game snack, favorite movie, but we're switching it up a little bit for you.
All right.
And we're doing Maryland or Princeton. So we're going to ask you different questions surrounding, campus, the state, the university as a whole. And you're just going to have to, right off the rip, give us your answer for which one you think is better in that regard.
All right, I'll try my best. Let's do it.
Okay. All right, we ready?
Mm-hmm.
Better food in the area.
Potomac pizza, steak and cheese sub.
That's a nicer campus with one.
Sorry, can you repeat that one?
Nicer campus.
Princeton.
Oh, harder conditioning program.
Maryland.
Okay. Better gear and / apparel.
Maryland.
Okay. We'd say funniest teammate that you played with. So either a teammate here at Maryland or a teammate here at Princeton. You got to name them.
Okay. Diamond Miller.
gee, I wonder who she plays for. Better academic office
Academic office.
or academic services helping you out with important issues.
Graduate students here don't get a lot, so I'm gonna go undergrad Princeton.
Okay. Now this one might be a little controversial for Maryland fans, but better logo.
And the M's very cool with the turtle, so I gotta go Maryland.
Okay. Which one hypes up their state flag more?
Come on now, Maryland.
And then better home arena.
Maryland.
Okay.
17,000 in comparison to 4.
All right. Well, that was the rapid fire. So I feel like you did a pretty good job.
Yeah.
People might hate a little bit on the pizza answer, but we'll see what people have to say. And then kind of wrapping up this week, obviously we're heading into March Madness. As a kid, I'm sure you watch plenty of basketball. We want us to give you your top 5. This can be men's or women's, whichever one you think. Top 5, and if you can't do 5, you can cop out and do 3. Players/moments in March Madness. So stuff you remember as a kid or playing it, like even playing in March Madness could be one of your experiences. Now, granted, that's a little unfair because, none of us have been in March Madness, but you can do it.
Okay, let me think. All right. Do I have to rank them or just?
Nah, just go for it.
Just go for it.
All right. So I'm thinking North Carolina and men's North Carolina, in Villanova. What year was that? 2016?
Chris Jenkins.
16.
That
was like the double clutch 3-point shot, and then last second. That's a coach's dream, right? To have the players like execute like that, because that was perfect with the trail 3.
Did you see Jay Wright when the guy hit it? That was Villanova's coach. All he did was he turned, he goes bang, and then just like walked in line to shake the hand. It was so fire. You have to watch it. Yeah, he didn't even react. He just goes bang.
See, you watch him enough, they're gonna make it. So that's one. I would definitely have to say Mississippi State. Their point guard scoring over. Who did she score over? UConn. First UConn scored over like Gabby Williams or something. I don't know. It was like a last second shot for the national championship.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
That was back in probably 2016 or 17.
Yeah. You got 2016 on your memory.
16. Yeah. That's one you can't go wrong with. You got to do Arike, Agumawale, right?
Yeah, the buzzer beater.
Back-to-back game buzzer beaters. Kobe. Yeah, those are 3 good ones that I got for you. Yeah.
Those are very solid. We appreciate that list.
Yeah.
And we appreciate you hopping on. Brendan, do you want to take us away here with Abby and kind of give her a final shout out?
Yeah, thank you so much for hopping on. I appreciate your time, and best of luck in the tournament. And we're watching out. Have a good one.
As of Sunday, it's been everything men's and women's basketball here at Under the Shell. Brackets got released. If you want to find out about other Maryland sports, Sam's Twitter for softball, Mike's Twitter for baseball.
Brennan's Twitter for hilarious jokes.
Exactly. And but right here, right now, we're all focused on March Madness.
Selection Sunday, top 5 day of the sports calendar. Is that a hot take to say?
It's an exciting day.
It's a cold take. It's top 3 day. It's a
top
day. It might be the best
top
day.
3.
The adrenaline of filling out your first bracket, which we'll get to our brackets later, is really something special.
That is elite. And all 3 of us are in a bracket pool. Hopefully you guys all got your brackets out there, family, friends, whatever you want to do. It's all random. My mother picks Gonzaga every year because she had a pet or a horse growing up named Gonzo, and she manages to win it. So it doesn't matter how much you know about basketball. Selection Sunday, fun day for everyone. And so today we're going to bring you everything when it comes to basketball because both teams are in it, Brendan.
Yes, so let's start with the men's. They're kicking it off. First game, not including the first 4 games, the first game of the true Field of 64 tournament, going down to Birmingham, Alabama to face West Virginia. Mike, what do we have?
Well, defensively, West Virginia is not the greatest. They have the 52nd ranked adjusted defense according to Ken Pom, but they have played a difficult schedule. They're in the Big 12.
Best conference in the nation.
Great conference for basketball, and they have the 6th ranked opponent defense. So they are going up against those tough opponents.
Mike,
So
just to make sure, just to clarify for the audience, what does that mean in terms of the adjusted defense? Does it just take team strength into account, that type of thing? Just want to make sure that we're clarifying.
So it is adjusted for the opponents they play,
Gotcha.
according to Ken Pom.
Gotcha. Yeah, so West Virginia obviously plays an elite schedule. Their defense is, maybe going to lack in
But
overall
offensively-
stats. But offensively, we all know.
They average the 3rd most points per game in the Big 12, and they're ahead of teams like Kansas, Kansas State, TCU, Iowa State, who are all higher seeded than them in the Big Dance. So it sounds kind of obvious, but Maryland just has to outscore them to win this game.
Yeah, which is crazy because you think of Bob Huggins' team as a usual defensive stalwart.
Press
They're going to press.
Virginia.
They're going to press the crap out of you, make you force turnovers, and then turn those into buckets. But Brendan, it seems as if this team maybe deviates from that a little bit, scores a little more offensively. When we were looking at West Virginia's schedule, what did you see from them? How did they perform in maybe those neutral and road games? And what can Maryland fans take away from who they've played this year?
Yeah, Maryland fans know that Maryland has been awful on the road. West Virginia, really not all that much better. They are 3-8 on the road with wins coming over Pitt, Texas Tech, and Iowa State. And then West Virginia was also 3-2 in neutral games. To give Maryland stats on that, Maryland was 2-9 on the road, 3-2 neutral. For teams in the top 31, Maryland's 31st in net rankings. Maryland, TCU, and West Virginia are the only teams with 3 or less road wins. And so if there was going to be a pull that you have to go away from home and play a game, Maryland got lucky in the sense that they're playing a team that is also not very strong.
But they got unlucky with who they would play in the second round, which will be an away game against Alabama and Birmingham.
Yeah,
They could also play Texas A&M.
Hey, don't sleep, bro.
Corpus
sorry.
Christi. They could play.
Really include that Corpus Christi part because you have the
very true.
audience very confused.
Well,
the Texas A&M was
Texas
a 16
close
seed.
to Alabama. It's still kind of.
Yeah, Mike, I don't know
we
how many
haven't seen-
Texas A&M Corpus Christi fans are making the trip.
I mean, those who live in Maryland know that the team in the top left corner of the bracket has been upset before.
That's true. That's
So,
very true. I think that
It won't happen, but it's possible.
I think that this game is super interesting because it's almost as if these two teams are kind of trending in opposite directions. Maryland struggled in the Big Ten tournament. They kind of closed on a whimper at the end of the year, and it seems as if West Virginia is really starting to kind of find the swing of things. They competed against Kansas. They did well in the Big 12 tournament, that type of thing. They have veteran guards. Joe Toussaint, former Big Ten player, played at Iowa, now at West Virginia. I think that it's really going to come down to Jameer Young, Mike. The guy, you look at guards in March, right, guys? That's what matters. If you have an elite guard who can make plays down the stretch, you're going to be in a better spot than most. But Jameer's really kind of struggled lately. It seems as if teams maybe are starting to load up on that left hand, maybe slow him down a bit. What have you seen from him? What can Maryland fans expect? How's he going to go out maybe in his last year?
You need Jameer to be the leader on offense. In losses, he only averages 13.8 points per game. When they win, he averages 17.3. That seems like a small difference, only 4 points, but in the grand scheme of things, that is a lot. And then I also think you got to include Donta Scott in this conversation. When they win, he averages 13.5. When they lose, he only averages 8 points a game.
Yeah.
I talked about it last week, but he has to step up and be that senior leader who's been here for all 4 years that he entered the season as.
You can look at stats. You can look at players. I think when you think about winning basketball games in March, what you're thinking about most is that energy, right? Teams that have big upsets. Obviously, Maryland in the first round isn't trying to make an upset, but Maryland so many times on the road has played just so dead with no energy, and I think that is going to be something that even if they are able to win the first game, is going to come back to bite them at some point in the tournament. That's going to be the reason they lose. You can look at all the metrics. You can look at shooting. That's going to be a product of it, but it's really about how much heart they're giving because I've seen the games at home way more fired up. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that definitely plays a role, and I think Maryland maybe plays a little tighter when they're on the road. Maybe it's not that they're not trying or that type of thing, but when you're on a road and things start to go south, you clench up, right?
Yeah,
that's what they've shown to do. And if Mike said they get to that second round and we can kind of give quick hits because you don't want to skip over a game, it's gonna be a road game. They're gonna be playing the number 1 overall seed in the entire dance, the Alabama Crimson Tide, who have had an elite season, SEC regular season champs, SEC tournament champs, led by star freshman Brandon Miller, is going to be a top 5 pick in the draft if character concerns hold up. And you have Javon Quinterly at the guard spot. Nate Oates is a really fun coach to their system. They run a lot of transition. They shoot a lot of threes. Brendan Maryland has had their trouble with Alabama in the past in the tournament. If they were able to knock off West Virginia on Thursday, how do you see it going Saturday? And what is the path to an upset maybe if you're Maryland?
Sitting on my grandparents' couch, last time Maryland played Alabama in the NCAA tournament, and Alabama could not miss. They couldn't miss a shot. It was one of the most disheartening games to see just Maryland give absolutely no fight. What would it take for Maryland to upset them? I think it's going to take an incredible game from Jahmir Young. He has to be lights out. He has to play all 40 minutes, 39 minutes, and just be unstoppable.
You talk about not clenching up on the road. This is the team you cannot clench up against. No. Alabama averages the 4th most possessions per game. They play fast, and you cannot clench up against that.
Maryland has played Purdue tight, but Purdue is the type of team that Maryland can play tight with. Alabama, I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, Alabama, like Mike said, they're going to get out and run. So if you're playing bad, they're going to blow you out, right? Purdue is going to kind of grind it down, slow you down. You can always kind of hang around with them. If you're playing bad against Alabama and they're making shots, say goodnight, blouses, season's over, walk off in tears because it's over.
The only way to beat Alabama really is to beat them at their own game, shooting the three efficiently.
And
Maryland has not done that. They averaged 33 from 3 this year. It's not good.
You know how Brendan was saying how Alabama just made shots? I think another part is
I wouldn't be surprised to see the same thing happen again.
You got to hope they just miss wide open threes, right? Like maybe sprinkle in a zone and hope they just...
It can happen to depth perception in an arena that never played them before, but it's really unlikely.
No, you're obviously the underdog. You're going to have to take chances, gamble. You're going to have to let up some open threes, and sometimes shooting variability. That's how upsets happen, right, guys? So it'll be interesting. But an aspect that we didn't talk about that I really think is also crucial in March is the man on the sideline. That's coaching. When you look at the first two matchups, potentially for Maryland, Bob Huggins, elite veteran coach, been at West Virginia for, however long I've been alive, it feels like. And then Nate Oates is kind of, the young hotshot who runs the modern system. Kevin Willard had a good first season, probably outpaced expectations for Maryland fans. But I know you two had a little bit of a debate about a prior coach, Mark Turgeon and Kevin Willard, and what fans' expectations and how the respective coaches were treated differed for the two of them. Mike, you kind of sparked this. What do you think about the two respective guys, and how do you see Maryland fans treating, one versus the other?
I am not saying Turgeon is a better coach than Willard. That is not true at all. Willard obviously has proven through his first season that he's a better coach. He's come up with the big wins that Turgeon hasn't. However, we've seen the same sort of trends. I don't know if you would say trends, but kind of tendencies from this team. We've seen from Maryland too, faltering in games that they should win, especially towards the end of the season. I mean, in their last 5 games of the regular season, they lost 3 games on the road. The teams that most people would have probably expected them to beat. They had a combined 48-45 record. I think if Turgeon lost those 3 games to end the season, everybody would be slamming him. They'd be like, this guy can't coach. This guy can't do that. Willard, it's a little quiet. I didn't really hear any criticism.
There wasn't a lot of criticism.
I didn't hear anything about Willard. And I think if Turgeon, it's just complete different fan treatment. I just find it interesting. I'm not saying he's a better coach.
I completely agree with you on that point. If Mark Turgeon had done exactly what Kevin Willard had just done in the past 2 weeks here, he'd be getting ripped. But I think if you look at how Maryland loses games under Kevin Willard, which they haven't actually lost that many of, for only 12 games, that's not that many games to lose. Turgeon lost way more. He also coached for many more seasons, but that's a different point. If you look at how they're losing games, they're not losing games the same way Turgeon will lose games. Turgeon will lose games because they haven't been able to drop an inbounds play, or they had no set defense.
What about when you had 3 guys surrounding a rebound against one of the worst offensive rebounding teams?
Not one of the worst Power 5 offensive rebounding team.
And
that is not coaching.
That's not.
Being able to physically pick up the ball.
Yeah, I would probably side with Brendan.
I think
coaching. I think that's just a lucky.
Coaching is not having an inbounds play. Coaching is not having a defensive scheme. Coaching is when things are going bad, not trying anything. You would see Mark Turgeon lose games where he just wouldn't do anything.
What about constantly starting
That's
slow
what
on the
I was
road?
going to ask, Brendan. You made the point that this team comes out with no heart. I think part of that is coaching. Maybe, getting your team ready, getting them ready to go out and perform on the road. That seems that might be an indictment that you think is on Willard's resume. What's your response to that?
I think a lot of that has to do with getting people fired up to play. Like you said, it's the coaching, and that's a part of Kevin Willard I really can't defend, and I don't know why. It seems like he almost is afraid to talk about it if you look at the interviews with it, and so that's something I think we'll have to see. The other thing you have to remember is I think getting hyped up and getting ready to play and getting ready to win a game comes from within the team. The coach can say so much, but if the people on the court don't want to win the game, they don't want to win the game. And the thing I'll say to that is Turgeon was here for many years. Turgeon recruited his own guys. I mean, by the end of his year, he's recruited every single person on that roster. He's gotten his transfers. Kevin Willard barely, I mean, he hasn't recruited, for freshmen coming in, he didn't recruit any of the roster, really. And so when you look at that, they're still not really his players. I think it would be a much better thing to talk about in, 3 or 4 years once the team is Kevin Willard. If you look at the talent he's bringing in, they obviously haven't stepped foot on Xfinity Center, but they're not his players yet, and so the talent he's bringing in is much higher. And so I think if you look at the team in 3 years, there'd be a very different conversation because I think Maryland will be a much better team. I would be surprised, like I said earlier, if Maryland is ever able to storm a court again because I think that they will be too high of a seed to do that.
That's fair enough. I mean, I was more talking about the fan criticism. He kind of went into recruiting there, which I thought was...
Yeah, I think that it's a fair point by Brendan, though, to bring up that, I think that Hakeem Hart and Donta Scott, those are the two seniors, and obviously we're not in the locker room, so I want to make that clear. We don't know, but from everything you can tell from media and words around the program, they're not maybe the most vocal of guys, right? They're not, the super emotional. Hakeem shows a lot of emotion on the court, but whenever you get him in a post game, he's very, short to the answer, kind of quiet, soft-natured guy. Now, obviously, we don't know if that's the case in the locker room, but if what their persona is to the media is the same behind closed doors, it might be hard to get that kind of juice going in the locker room.
So you feel like it's more of like a player leadership thing?
I think that we don't know, right? It's hard to tell. I think that you bring in a DHS, that type of thing, who seems like he's a very dog mentality, like I'm gonna go get mine type of thing. I think that could help, and that plays into Brendan's recruiting thing. I also think you guys didn't. Brendan kind of brought this up, but it also is just different when you have a new coach, right? There's so much less criticism out there because everybody is like, well, it's just their first season.
Also,
I feel like Turgeon was never accepted from the beginning, though.
Yeah, so I wasn't. I
replacing
can't
Gary
say, so I don't know. But if he wasn't accepted,
it felt like from the beginning.
Turgeon also didn't win a tournament game until 2015.
He also followed Gary Williams.
Yeah,
and the program wasn't where it was when Gary, from 2001 to 2010, the program were in completely different spots. I wouldn't say that Turgeon was taking on that heavyweight program.
I think people want to love Kevin Willard. It's his first season. After the Illinois game, people starting, Kevin Willard chants walking out of Xfinity Center. I think people coming off of a Mark Turgeon era that made the tournament sometimes, but the performances in the tournament were not strong. And people at the end of the day judge you on really 2 or 3 things. Big Ten performance, regular season and conference, and how you do in the NCAA tournament. People don't remember every single game. People remember those things. And so I think when you're talking about criticism, that's what it comes down to.
People will not be able to remember the 2020 season because it never ended for Turgeon. I'll say that, and that'll be my last point.
Yeah.
Well said. I agree with you.
I think it's a great debate. I think that, you got to just give it some time, right? We can come back to this once we get into year 3, year 4 of the Willard tenure. But,
and we will.
It's an interesting debate to be had.
We'll come back to brackets, but let's go to women's basketball, right?
Yeah, we talked about a team who kind of slumped going into the year. This is a team that's on the way up, and that's Maryland women's.
What a success story.
They got kind of hosed, to be honest with you, I think, in my opinion, with the bracket pool. You get number 1 overall seed, South Carolina. That means the committee considered Maryland to be the 8th best team in the country. They got punished for losing a 3-point game to Iowa, who also got screwed and should have been a 1 seed, in my opinion. So a couple of missteps there by the committee, in my thoughts. But they're still a 2 seed. You still get to host 2 games. They play Holy Cross in the 2:15 spot on Friday, and then you get winner of Arizona, West Virginia.
Could have a double-double
potentially
there.
a double rivalry game, right? Technically, West Virginia,
Absolutely.
Maryland.
That game should be sold out if it's Xfinity.
I think that I definitely think that should be a cool game for people to go to. It is spring break, so that might be tough.
Absolutely, it's very true.
But I think that could be a very exciting game. And I think that this Maryland team, I went to the Selection Sunday show. they all just seem ready. They got a lot of people who, maybe weren't around for a tournament game. Faith Masonis has never really contributed that much in a tournament. Abby Meyers played in 1 game, or 2 games, sorry. Brene Alexander's never been in one. Cheyenne Sellers wasn't a huge contribution.
That has to scare you as a fan, right?
Yeah, but I think this team is more so hungry. I think that they're almost the opposite of the men's team in that they always are ready to go, whether they're playing on the road, at home. After they lost to Nebraska earlier this season, it seemed as if they just woke up, guys. And I think that this team is built for tournament basketball. That's my opinion. The shooting is great. You have a star player in Diamond Miller. You have, good backups who can come in and provide minutes, but not too many, so the coach is playing too many players, right? I like this team to go forward in the first 2 rounds, and we'll touch back on it, once we get there. But I don't see them losing in College Park.
Sam, you just mentioned the games in College Park that Maryland should win, but you did mention a little bit how they did get kind of hosed in terms of the bracket placement, 8th best team, whatever, possibly having to go through Notre Dame and South Carolina. But focusing on Notre Dame, Maryland did play Notre Dame away early in the year, did get the win, but it was a very close game. I believe it was
Diamond Miller step back game winner.
Oh yes, that was a very exciting game, but it took all the way to the end.
Yeah.
Having to go through possibly Notre Dame, and then after winning that game, 2 days later,
that's an emotional. That's a roller coaster.
Would have to go. I mean, Notre Dame doesn't want to lose again on a buzzer beater. Have to play the Giant. Talk about it, Mike.
Yeah, so talking about the Giant, South Carolina.
They have Giants.
Yeah, talking about the Giant at the end of the road for Maryland, if they get there, they would have to face South Carolina, and I do not know if anybody for the Terps can match what Aaliyah Boston does in the post for the Gamecocks.
Yeah, they got Giants, and they are a Giant, Mike.
She is the 5th most efficient post player in college basketball, according to 538, and that is not something the Terps want to look forward to because they are the 8th-ranked defense in the Big Ten. They struggled defending, and
especially against the post.
And
South Carolina dominated them down there in College Park. Because remember, guys, they played Notre Dame. They also played South Carolina earlier this year. Diamond Miller missed that game, Mike. How big of a difference do you think that could make in a potential rematch?
Well, if it becomes a game where Boston is kind of dominating the post, you need another one-on-one player to kind of take over. You're going to need Diamond Miller to take over. On the other end of that, you also got Zia Cook for South Carolina.
And Bria Beal.
She's shooting 36% from 3, 15.3 points per game. She's their leading scorer. They got a bunch of weapons there. It's going to be a full team effort for them. Diamond Miller, Abby Meyers, going to need to all come together to defeat that Giant.
Yeah, South Carolina, I mean, they're the favorite for a reason, guys. But even to get to the Elite Eight with this team that Brenda Fries has compiled together, you would take that every day of the week. I think
it's a success for this year. I would agree with you. I think the Brenda Fries coaching debate is something completely different. Had so many successful teams. Obviously, women's basketball is dominated by 5 or 6 powerhouses, and Maryland just seems to fall in that second tier every single year. Very good team. Very strong performance in the Big Ten. Tournament time, going to lose to one of the Giants.
Yeah, I think that women's basketball is less upsets than men just because of the discrepancy of talent. And there's a discrepancy.
And funding, if you want to.
Funding, yeah. That's exactly what we were going to talk about because Game 1, super interesting reports came out this week, guys. Holy Cross, the team that Maryland's going to be facing in round 1, they're going to be taking the Amtrak, which is
I've taken the Amtrak to College Park. Not very fun.
And especially if you have suitcases and are in your team-issued gear, huddled up for probably the biggest game of your life. Basically, how the rule works is that they just changed it. The NCAA changed it from 350 miles to 400 for how they charter planes. Holy Cross is 398 miles away, 2 miles under the discrepancy, and they can't get the school's refusing to get them a charter plane to fly to Maryland. So obviously that's kind of a weird situation. Holy Cross is a private university that makes a boatload of money off student tuition and things like that. A very big boat. Yeah, a very large boat. Brendan, you're a Boston native. Take us through the shoes of what a potential elite athlete could be going through riding on the Amtrak. You know, you're a cross-country track guy, but think about this as if you're playing the biggest game of your life and you're riding the train with a bunch of, random characters.
I've never taken the train all the way from Boston to Maryland, but I've taken pieces of it. I've taken from New York to D.C., and I've taken from Boston to New York, but never all at once. And that's a long trip. I've survived taking the Amtrak for many hours. I'm sure many people have, but I didn't have to go play an NCAA tournament game at a 2 seed.
Would
So
you be able to rest on the Amtrak, do you say?
it depends on their class. I mean, we need some really
We need
strong
some real
journalism.
investigative
I
journalism.
mean, they wouldn't pay for the charter flight. I think they're paying for.
Yeah, first class, right.
I'm trying to figure out what like fatigue issues they're gonna have coming into this.
I don't know
game.
how big of a storyline it really is.
You want to
but-
know another incredible story? This game is full of them. For a 2:15 matchup, Maryland plays on St. Patrick's Day, right? Friday. Guess who the leading scorer is for Holy Cross and where they're from?
Is she from Ireland?
She's an Ireland native.
Wow.
Oh,
This girl needs to drop a 40 bomb and support her country on St. Patrick's Day. If Holy Cross manages to pull off the upset, I'll have one word written about Maryland in the recap, and it will all be about the St. Patrick's Day upset from the leading scorer from Holy Cross. Incredible storylines, but you got to expect Maryland to win. If they were taking a plane, if they were taking a bus, shoot, they could be taking a boat, and I still think Maryland would be able to take down Holy Cross and get to that, potential Elite Eight matchup with South Carolina. And that leads into maybe the best part of this episode, guys. Bracket time. So we got men's, we got women's. We're not going to reveal the whole bracket because none of you want to listen to that. So we're just going to bring out our final four.
I mean, imagine
picks.
how boring that would be.
Yeah. Mike, start us off. Men's final four pick, and then we'll reverse it back around with the women's. Start us with men's.
Are we going with descriptions? Why, or just listing the teams?
You can give a brief description.
UConn, Alabama,
Wow.
Marquette, and Texas. So
Okay.
I'll start with UConn. They got a good offense. They can really shoot the ball, and they have quality wins over Alabama, Providence, Creighton, and Marquette. I believe in them. They had that really strong start to the season, kind of fizzled out at the end. But, I mean, when you look at them as a team, Ken Pom, they're ranked the 4th best team in the country. They have their offense, I talked about their offense. They're the 6th best adjusted offense efficiency. Defense, it's so-so. I mean, it's 18th, but I believe in them. Next up, we got Alabama. I think they arguably got the best player outside of Zach Edey in college basketball with Brandon Miller. It's hard to play against Alabama. It's hard to beat them. You kind of got to play their own game or hope that they miss shots to beat Alabama. And I talked about the possessions, how they play fast tempo. Then Marquette. On the other side of the Big East with UConn, there's Marquette. In his 2nd season with the Golden Eagles, Shaka Smart has led them to a 28-6 record and the number 1 spot in the Big East. This is another team with a really fast-paced offense, and they're led by Tyler Kolek, who won the Big East Player of the Year. He averages 7.7 assists. They can really distribute the ball there. That's the 2nd most in the nation. And then Texas, despite the coaching drama that they've had over the past year, they've been able to stay the course so far this season, which I think would be just a great story to go to the Final Four with an interim coach. That is just like a narrative waiting to happen.
It's Disney type things.
They've
Brendan?
They've got real quick. They got a 14-8 record against Quad 1 teams, 18-8 against Quad 1 and 2 combined, and they got the 2nd best defense efficiency according to Ken Pom.
That's pretty good, Mike. I like all those picks. The only thing I would have is I don't like UConn. But the other 3 I can mess with. B?
Yeah, a little bit less explanation for mine. My final 4.
As always.
I think that a couple of things. When you make your bracket, I don't know if I hope these things happen to be very cool, but I more think like how many of these can I get right at the end of the day, because that's what it's all about. So my final 4 is Alabama, Duke, Houston, and Kansas. Alabama, I think they're going to win. Duke, I have them in there. Very strong play in the ACC tournament. I don't truly know how strong the ACC is until the tournament. It's hard to know.
It's bad.
But Sam thinks it's bad. So it's really hard to say. And then other side, Houston, Kansas, like I said, strong 1 seeds, very strong resumes this year. I don't think Kansas will win it because going back-to-back is extremely difficult. And so
those are pretty good picks. I think that, sometimes you look to, like you said, Brendan, overlook the 1 seeds. They're the best teams in the country for a reason, right?
Absolutely.
You have to take some of them. And I did exactly that. I went with Alabama in the Final Four, unanimous among all of us. And then I took Kansas State to make it in that side of the region. I really like them. I think that
I have them in my Elite Eight. Yeah, that's a good
the East bracket is pretty bad, to be honest. Like, I don't love Marquette and I don't love Purdue. So out of all those teams, I would say Kansas State is my favorite to make it out. And I have Duke in the Elite Eight, so I think we're kind of balanced on that.
Okay.
And then on the other side, I have Houston. That's actually my pick to win it all, which we didn't end up giving. But if you guys want to go around and say your natty picks.
I said Alabama, yeah.
I had Houston. Brendan had Alabama.
I had Alabama. I'll say this about Houston. The injury to Marcus Sasser worries me because that's a groin injury. Those injuries, I don't know if you remember, going to the NBA just real quick, that's the injury LeBron had his first season with the Lakers. That basically had him out for the rest of the season. He came back for a tad bit, but then they shut him down again. Those injuries linger, and it is hard to come back from that, and he suffered it in the conference tournament. So we'll see how he recovers.
Professional LeBron.
Who's LeBron James again?
But yeah.
What college did he go to? No.
So just completely disregarding Mike's input there, I'm going to go with Houston. I agree Sasser's injury scares me, but he wasn't there last year, and they still made the Elite Eight, and we're a pretty dominant team. I like Kelvin Sampson, and then I have UCLA. They would be my pick if Jalen Clark hadn't tore his ACL. I think that is.
I also would have picked UCLA.
That would have been an elite.
They would have won the tournament.
Yeah, I think
people who were at the Maryland
people who are
UCLA
Terps
game,
fans know exactly what happened.
They couldn't be more biased.
They're like, this team is the best. How is Purdue a 1 seed, and how is UCLA not a shoo-in for the Natty? But so I have Houston, UCLA, Alabama, Kansas State. Houston winning it all. So I think that none of us have a really, terrible bracket. But
you won't know until the game
happens. That's why we love doing it.
Any crazy upset picks?
I was about to say, does anybody have an upset?
I have a bunch, but Brendan, you can start.
I think my biggest upset is UCSB over Baylor.
Some
people might not like that.
No, I
just
don't.
looking at the ESPN stats they provided, which is why I picked it.
Also, a very great feature they added. I
Yes.
love how they do that. It's not overwhelming, but it's very to the point.
UCSB's top 6 scorers shoot over 46% from the field. How do you win a game in March? Good shooting.
Yeah, I like that pick. I'm going to go my upset. We'll do one upset, and I'm going to go Kent State over Indiana. I don't think Indiana's that great. Kent State is on a heater. They won the MAC. MAC teams always seem to do okay in the tournament. I also have a personal connection to the MAC. It's close to my hometown of Michigan, so I like them. I don't think Indiana's very good.
I like that pick a lot, Sam.
I was gonna pick Kent State too.
Check it out.
Check it out. We're covering.
Me and Big Mike covering a couple matchups here. So
I was gonna take Kent State, but since you took Kent State, I guess I will take. I guess I'll go Charleston. I mean,
okay.
They have 5 guys.
I also have them winning. Yeah.
Who score in double figures a game, and it's not an easy team to slow down. They're also a pretty fast tempo team. So we'll see what happens in that game against San Diego State, who is also a very good team. They've only lost 3 times since December 10th.
Wow. Last thing before we go to women's, all of us have Maryland losing in the round of 32, or do any of us have them losing to West Virginia?
32.
32. I have them to Alabama.
Yeah.
Okay. I could not bring myself to take them to lose against West Virginia.
As someone who wants to keep watching the games and covering them as a journalist, I
want to see them win.
Of course.
Exactly.
Very natural. Good reasoning, Sam.
Yeah. Now onto the women's. This is kind of a very interesting field this year because I think, if I'm not mistaken, and I could be wrong, my national champion is not an upset pick.
Should we say our national champion on
3?
1, 2, 1.
South Carolina. Yeah, that's not surprising. But my Final Four, South Carolina, Iowa, who I thought should have been a 1 seed, LSU and Baylor on the other side. I really wished LSU and Maryland could have been in the same pool. That would have made for some great journalism pieces.
Oh, my God, it would have.
But, yeah, and you know what's crazy about that Final Four is that Maryland would have played 3 of those teams, Iowa, South Carolina, and Baylor. And then they obviously have Angel Reese on the LSU team. So that's my Final Four. And then I have South Carolina beating LSU in SEC rematch of the Natty.
My Final Four is South Carolina, Stanford, LSU, and UConn. And then I have South Carolina beating UConn in the national championship. UConn, 2 seed this year, but historically been extremely solid, extremely good coaching. So many talented players.
Gino and Dawn Staley, the 2 coaches of that, have a little bit of beef too, so I'd love to see that, Natty. I like those picks, Brendan, even if it's a little, traditional, but those are all solid teams. Mike?
And then to round it out, I got South Carolina, UConn, Indiana, and Iowa. South Carolina, Indiana final with South Carolina taking it, of course. Iowa, I mean, you've seen Caitlin Clark now. How good is she? Is she good?
She's a certified bucket.
Okay.
She's her. If that is proper terms. And then lastly, before we move on, how far do we all have Maryland going? I have them to the Elite Eight. Eventually losing to South Carolina. Yeah. So
and then any upset picks here?
Yeah. Actually, this is kind of a.
I got one.
Yeah, I have one. It's a little different with women's just because you kind of have more discrepancy. As I said, I would consider Baylor to the Final Four to be an upset pick. Do we consider that to be something? If not, I'll do my Drake over Louisville pick. So that's my 5-12 upset. And then Baylor to the Final Four I consider to be a relative upset.
Yeah, wow, that's a kind of, I didn't really realize they were 7th seed at this time. Okay, all right. Regrouping here. I have, my upset pick is FGCU, Florida Gulf Coast University over Washington State. Why, you may ask? Well,
Dunk City.
That's not really why, but what I was going to say is that Washington State lost to Stanford by 33. Florida Gulf Coast University lost to Stanford by 24. In theory, they should win by 9. Okay, I don't know if that'll happen, but that's my upset pick.
Mike, what do you got? In terms of upsets, Mike, it just seems like you got the straight bracket, so.
Pretty chalk, yeah.
I think Mike went to the autofill bracket and then went to seeds.
But overall,
honestly, that'll probably work.
I'm very excited for the women's tournament. I think Maryland,
Likewise.
getting to cover Maryland will be really fun. If they make it to the Final Four, I think I might be going to San Antonio. So that would be very cool. Don't know if that'll be happening, but we'll see. But yeah, that's cool. Speaking of women's, we brought on Abby Meyers. We've talked about it. You heard her. We also did our little top 5, and we're gonna, recap it from our perspectives. The rules we had was you had to have one women's moment, one men's moment, and then one Maryland-related moment. So, Brendan, take us through your top 3 and give us why you went with what you did.
I'll start with my Maryland moment first. I guess we can go around here. I had Melo Trimble scoring 24 points over Hawaii to send Maryland to the Sweet 16. One of those deep runs. Really shouldn't call that deep.
Second weekend,
The
wow.
deepest run, actually.
With Mark Turgeon. Just an exciting game. That was kind of in my mind when I was watching college basketball back then. They kind of put Maryland on the map for people of our generation who didn't get to see Gary Williams.
What time do you remember any reason what time that game was, and if Hawaii fans do you think were tuning in, or do you think the rest of the nation was only paying attention?
I remember Hawaii upset Jaylen Brown in California the game before. So everybody.
I mean, it was a close game.
Everybody was on the Hawaii train. That's a good pick, Brendan. Melo was the reason I started, paying attention to Maryland basketball. He was, an elite player and really fun to watch. It was kind of hard to go through Maryland tournament moments. I'm not trying to hate, but there's been since we've been born, because that was a stipulation we did since 2004. So I went with the women's team making back-to-back Final Fours. I think that's super impressive. Brenda Fries continues to do that. They couldn't get over the hump each time. Brennan kind of talked about that earlier with, maybe that second tier of programs. But making it back-to-back years to the Final Four teams, that's pretty special to cut down nets in 2014 and 2015. So I ultimately went with that as my Maryland moment.
For mine, 3 seasons into Turgeon's career here, he had only made one postseason tournament, and it was the NIT. Finally, he made it into the big dance in 2014, 2015, led by Melo Trimble. And the way they got their first win in the Turgeon era was pretty fun. So they're leading by 3 with 13 seconds left, and against Valparaiso. And Turgeon sends in Varun Ram, a former walk-on, to play defense on this last possession by Valpo, right? So, Ram's playing defense. Ball goes to his guy. Guy takes the 3 to tie the game, and he swipes it up into the
crowd.
Into the crowd, kind of. It was weird how the ball kind of seemed to be in the air forever.
It was like a movie.
It was kind of like a movie, especially in Turgeon's career.
Right. This is the climax.
This was the climax, and the game ends. Buzzer sounds, and they win the game. With the walk on. So that's pretty special for him.
That's a pretty cool moment, and you gotta love that Turge had the trust to bring in someone of that caliber. Brendan, we're going now to our women's moment.
I got a fun one.
And this is a classic Brendan Weissel moment for any of you who've listened to the podcast. The guy pulls the most random games and somehow turns them into the coolest stories. Brendan, what happened in your women's moment?
So I remember just watching, I don't remember what day of the week it was. It's first round games. It's you just turn them on, see what's happening. It's a 1 versus 16 in the women's tournament, and the 1 seed's gonna win. But this wasn't your everyday win. Baylor, 119 points. Texas Southern, 30 points. I didn't misread that. 89-point victory. I remember watching that game. I was like, is a joke? They're gonna score 30 points
Is this
the whole
a bit?
Game. Baylor had 12 players score.
That's absurd.
Just take a quick guess how many people on Texas Southern team scored. How many
4.
players do you think?
Just their starting lineup, 5.
4.
3.
Jesus.
And one player had 19, 1 3, 1 8.
Wow.
Shout out to the one with
Shout out to the one. She showed she could ball.
No, she did not. She went 4 for 19.
Oh,
never mind.
she was
All right.
chucking.
I rescinded.
Hey,
I mean-
hey, if no one else is taking them, you got to take it. You know
Just
what I mean?
what do you think they went shooting percentage? How many shots? They
Dude,
were
I don't know, 7%.
8 for 58.
That. Kim Mulkey, the Baylor coach at the time, she was all gas, no break in that game, saying, screw them kids.
That wouldn't happen in rec league, your local rec league game.
Nah, they're cutting that off. That's a pretty funny moment. My women's pick, not anything like that. I decided to go with a national title game, and it was the first national title game between two unbeatens. You had Notre Dame, UConn, two Titanic programs going up against each other, both 37-0 at the time. It ended up not being a great game. UConn won by double digits, but the game was sold out. I think it's still the highest viewership of any women's basketball game. So it just really brought attention to the sport, and I think that that's two titans clashing against each other. Everybody loves March Madness for the upsets and the crazy picks, right? But when you have something like that happen, that's pretty special. So that was my pick.
For my women's pick, it's going to be another Maryland moment, too. Last time they were up by 3. This time they're trailing by 3. Last time was round of 64. This time it's the championship game. It's Christy Tolliver's game-tying shot at the end of regulation, sending the Terps into OT. And then people forget, she also hit 2 free throws in OT to put them ahead, too, and they never lost that lead. It was like within 30 seconds left. Yeah. So I'm going to take Christy Tolliver's shot to send it to OT for Maryland women to win their first and only title.
That's great. That's probably the biggest Maryland tournament moment ever, out of any of them. So that's a good pick, Mike.
And now on to my men's moment. I actually meant to apologize. I know we have a big listener base at Texas Southern, so just a little apology. So I know that 89-point loss still hurts you guys a little bit. So my men's moment is the Duke Wisconsin 2015 national championship. Grayson Allen played with so much heart in that game. Just
so much heart. Guy who will just always lay it on the line. Never.
He will. I mean, you should see him saving balls in that game. Tyus Jones. It's just a spectacle. For Maryland fans who may not remember that game, you will remember that Rashid Suleiman ended up joining the Maryland team the year after he got kind of kicked off the Duke team. And if he had stayed on that team, I don't think Duke would have won that national championship because Grayson Allen, who had such an incredible impact in that game, most likely would have seen very few minutes that season. But Suleiman went out, Grayson Allen took over, and Duke wins 2015 national championship. A little bit of a unique story in there.
That's crazy. What's also crazy about that is Wisconsin in the Final Four beat Kentucky, who was
hadn't
undefeated.
lost, yes.
So they were kind of setting up this whole Duke, Kentucky, undefeated versus the powerhouse. And then Wisconsin, made some noise and almost won it, but Duke. Obviously, Grayson Allen.
To be fair, Duke did destroy Michigan State in the other.
They did. Yeah. They smoked them. And I actually really like Tyus Jones. Grayson Allen, I hate his guts, but I really like Tyus Jones.
That's not going to be popular on the graphic for you.
Oh no.
Fun fact: that game was on the second night of Passover, the Michigan State Duke game in the Final Four. Just fun fact.
Fun fact. Go Jews. And for my men's pick, my mom, my dad, my Michigan friends, they were all pissed at me because I took Michigan State as a top 5 logo last week. So I'm making my amends. This has kind of a personal cool moment for me. I was watching the Michigan-Houston game in 2018. Michigan had kind of a great run, but this guy named Rob Gray was going off for Houston. He had a man bun. He just was dominating. And they go to the line up 2 with 3 seconds left. Houston does. And everybody's like, this is game. Rob Gray tells the skinny little freshman, Jordan Poole, the baddie specialist on Instagram and TikTok, that, hey, where are you from, Poole? Poole goes, oh, I'm from Milwaukee. And Rob Gray goes, yeah, you about to be going back to Milwaukee. Turns out, 10 seconds later, Devin Davis misses 2 free throws for Houston. My dad goes, one time, please. Deep pass down the court to the right wing. Jordan Poole launches a crazy 3. His legs flare out. The ball just seems to float through the net, drops in. They all chase him. He runs away from them around the court right in front of the Houston bench, waves goodbye to Rob Gray. They all tackle him. It's probably one of the coolest, moment I shared with my dad, my family. My little brother came running out because of the screaming. He started crying. He's like, what's wrong? What's wrong? And it just turned out Michigan made it to the Sweet 16. They eventually would make it to the national championship, get destroyed by Villanova. But I love that moment. I like Jordan Poole, so that's my men's moment.
That was a really solid team for Michigan, too.
Yeah, it was. It really was. It was a good squad.
It's the moment every kid kind of dreams of. I remember being on the blacktop as a kid, chucking half-court shots, it would go in 5, 4, 3, 2 in
Yeah,
my head.
yeah, I know
you
that.
repeat it like 50 times
Until you finally make
until
one.
you finally make one, right?
Yeah.
Well,
Give me 5 more minutes, Mom.
in the Final Four for Jalen Suggs, he had that opportunity in 2021. After UCLA, they tied up the game with 3.3 seconds left. Suggs took the inbound pass, ran straight down the court, just inside the half-court line, chucks up the three, swish. I don't even think it hit anything
No,
but the
it was
net, right?
It was
It was
crazy.
nothing but the net. Gonzaga advances to the championship. They did lose, but crazy shot, crazy moment for Suggs. And that's what he's going to be remembered for when his career is over.
Yeah, it's only a shame. That's such an elite shot. It's a
Mm-hmm.
shame that there weren't fans in there because it was the COVID year, but that's like what March is all about, right? Like UCLA was this pesky underdog. Gonzaga's this titan. It comes down to the last wire, and this young freshman makes this crazy
I
shot.
did forget that's crazy. They're fans.
I know.
I was watching the highlight. I was like, this is like
This is
so
so
much
quiet,
more
yeah.
quiet right now for what I think it should be.
Yeah, that was an elite game.
It's one of the greatest game winners of all time. Just nobody. Just
No.
dead.
But yeah, that was pretty awesome. And yet again, we saw a talented player who ended up making in the league, Jalen Suggs, and that's what he'll be remembered for. But we got another person who's going to be remembered for one specific game. So we're going to bring in our Terrific Turk segment. This one is going to be a little different. I'm taking this one, and it's going to be about a specific person/game. So
Take us away, Sam.
let me take you back to a cold night in February. Traveling, you're on the plane all the way to the gorgeous campus of Chapel Hill. Snow's falling down, it's brisk, but you're super excited. You're getting to go watch North Carolina, surrounded by Carolina Blue fans. You're walking through the gates to the new $84 million arena that still had that new crisp paint smell on it from its opening just 2 months ago. That would be the notorious Dean Dome. We all know of it. It's an arena that holds a raucous 21,000 North Carolina fans. That night, it was particularly loud because the Tar Heels still hadn't lost in their new stomping grounds. This is back when North Carolina had just opened up their new arena. Students coined the nickname Dean Smith because of how elite this coach was. All these fans are super excited. North Carolina's 25-1. It's just this electric atmosphere. And then here comes the rain of boos as the red-dressed Maryland Terrapins walk out in their uniforms. A team that wasn't even deserving of a primetime spot. The Terps had lost 6 of their last 7 road games, kind of similar to this year's team, as Maryland fans know, while North Carolina was again considered a shoo-in at the Final Four, leading the ACC, leading the country. They're an elite squad that had just lost MJ, I think, 2 years prior, but had Brad Daugherty and Kenny the Jet Smith, as we all know, legend on the TNT NBA crew, but he was a pretty elite college player too, manning a solid squad who was looking to get back to the Final Four. Dean Smith team, that would have 6 future NBA players on it, and obviously nobody thought Maryland had a chance. This is a team that, was 500, don't really have any, great players, but they had the best player on the floor that night, it would prove. Not only was he the best player on the floor, but he's considered to be the best player in Maryland basketball history, according to former Terp basketball player Tony Massenberg. That would be Len Bias, who entered the arena with not a smile on his face. All of his teammates are gazing up at the rafters, seeing all these blue fans swarming the arena. How cool it is. We get to be playing in the Dean Dome. You look at Len Bias, complete blank face, locked in, making jumper after jumper after jumper in warm-ups. No flashy dunks, no nothing. He just is in the zone. It was so just locked in when you watch the film. Instead, when the All-American then got into the game, it continued. He got to his pull-up at any point. Len Bias was known for his mid-range. He could get to his spot at any time. North Carolina tried to send tons of different bodies at him. They tried guarding him with Kenny Smith, who was considered to be this pesky, quick defender. They tried guarding him with Daugherty, who was the taller 6'11" wing. They tried guarding him with backups, who just were focused on fouling him and guarding him. It didn't matter. Bias went to work, scoring 35 points en route to Maryland's upset 4-point win over the Tar Heels. He just went absolutely nuclear. Teammate Keith Gatland said, Lenny was so great that night. They'd just taken the 3-point shot back away from the game, so if not, he would have had 50. The guy just went on a tear. He was in this aura. Bias not only tore it up on offense, but his defensive performance was elite as well. In the game's final moments, Kenny Smith had a wide-open layup, it seemed. Going to cut the game down to 2. It seemed as if North Carolina was going to get back in the game and win it, avoid the crazy upset that everybody in the Dean Dome had bated breath. Len Bias comes out of nowhere, swats it back to friggin' Duke for all that anybody could know. The guy just was an elite player that night. He was an elite player for Maryland that season. And everybody, came out of that game as if the head coach, Lefty Driscoll, said after, if Lenny Bias isn't the best player in the world, then I don't know who is. And everybody knows Bias for obviously the tragic story that happened. He died of an overdose. This elite player, this great guy who's super charismatic, tragedy struck at a young age. There's a 30 for 30 on it. You should go watch it. But I think that it's important to remember just how good of a player this guy was. To score 35 points on the road against a top 5 team in a place where they hadn't lost, and to do that, it kind of solidify Maryland as, we're on the come up, we're coming for, the ACC, and give themselves a real rival in North Carolina that would happen. I think that game really started to be the turning point. And when you look back on all the teammates, players, and coaches, they all just speak about how much of an aura, it almost was like a glow, they said, that Len Bias had. So I think that when you look at that game, it turned Maryland basketball around, and it's what I think people should focus on when they talk about Len Bias. Not the cocaine, not, the death that he might have had that, he suffered tragically, but how good of a player and how special he was as a young man. So that's my terrific terp.
That's a hell of a job you just did right there, Sam.
Wow.
Way to paint the image in the listeners' minds, and kudos to you. I think Len Bias truly took people in the minds of kids who lived in Maryland,
right?
Made them want to come to the University of Maryland, and that's why so many of the greats have now come through.
Len Bias is going to have a great pro career, too. I mean, people forget he was drafted to that Celtics team. They finished first in the East that year.
Yeah.
Had Larry Bird, Kevin McHale, Robert Parrish. He was just a great all-around player.
Yeah. So, as we get into March Madness, guys, we'll see what player maybe leaves their legacy. Maybe it's an Abby Meyers. Maybe it's a Jameer Young. That's why we love March, and that's why we all hope you listen to this episode, and we appreciate you for taking the time. Make sure you go vote for the polls on Instagram, Twitter. We're going to be posting a bunch of content, and keep along with all of us at our respective sites.
Yeah, we got Abby's picks in there as well, and it's a hell of an episode. It's going to be incredible month of March and into April for the national championship. We hope you enjoy this episode, and we'll see you after the break.
Thank you.